Why did the Cold War happen? That's the question that you should be able to answer by the end of this video. Let's start with the definition of what the Cold War was. So the Cold War was a tension and distrust, a period of animosity between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. This happened for 45 years after World War II ended up to 1990. So, World War II is going on. The Soviet Union and the United States are allies. They're fighting side by side. How is it that once the war is over, they're enemies? Well, first of all, they were never really allies. Prior to World War II, Russia had a revolution back in 1917 and they became communist. The United States does not like communism. It is the opposite of everything we stand for. In the 1920s, America had what was called a Red Scare and persecuted anyone who had communist ideas in our country. There was also a lot of distrust between the two countries, and for good reason. Before World War II started, Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union made an agreement called the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact with Hitler, our arch enemy. They made an agreement not to invade each other. The secret agreement was one example of why America did not trust the Soviets. On the other hand, the Americans also had their secrets. You may remember the Manhattan Project. During World War II, scientists were working on the atomic bomb that they ultimately were successful in creating. Well, we didn't tell our allies, the Soviets, about the Manhattan Project or the atomic bomb until after the fact. So this mistrust goes both ways. Another problem between the Soviets and the Americans were that after World War II, two superpowers emerge in the world. One is the United States, the other the Soviet Union. Nobody wants to share the number one slot. Each side wanted to be the superpower. Another deep divide between the Soviets and the United States was their political and economic ideas. So, in the United States, who is it that owns businesses? And in the Soviet Union, who was it that owned businesses? Did you say that individuals own businesses in the United States? Because if you did, you would be right. Anybody can open a business here. You want to open a business? You can do it tomorrow. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, the government owns the businesses. Who decides what to produce? Again, in the United States, it's individuals. Do you want to produce jewelry, clothing, grow potatoes or tomatoes? It's completely up to the business owner. In the Soviet Union, who is it? The government. Finally, who sets the prices? In the United States, no, it's not individuals, it's supply and demand. If there is a lot of one product and a lot of people don't want it, the price goes down. If, however, a lot of people want a product and there's a shortage, the price goes up. So the market decides how much anything costs. In the Soviet Union, it is, once again, the government. Here's the American perspective of Soviet economy. We don't think too highly of it. You can see the American supermarket with lots of choices. You can get 15 kinds of pickles. Then there's the Soviet supermarket. The Soviets were renowned for having a shortage of what's called consumer goods. People waited on long lines just for a loaf of bread. On the other hand, You've got the Soviet perspective of the American capitalist system. According to the Soviets, yes, capitalism can make millionaires and billionaires of people, and at the same time creates poor people and even homeless people. So you have one guy who owns 4 houses, a yacht, and a Lamborghini, and another poor person who doesn't even have a home. This is not fair. It's unequal. It's a terrible system, if you ask the Soviets. There are also very different goals that the Soviets versus the U.S. had. What you're looking at is a map of the Soviet Union. That's the big dark red country. And then the lighter red countries are what are called Soviet satellites. The Soviet Union created governments in the neighboring countries that were communist so that they would have allies nearby. That's what the Soviets wanted to do. They wanted to spread communism. Well, guess what? The United States wanted exactly the opposite. They wanted containment. They wanted to stop the spread of communism. Two superpowers, opposite goals. Now that you've watched the whole video, it's time for a riddle. Okay, you ready? If you have 13 apples in one hand and 11 oranges in the other, what do you have? Big hands! Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned something.